The space station floated quietly in the dark. Inside, behind thick walls made of the strongest metal, was a problem no one could solve. A small creature sat in a white room. It looked beautiful with fur that shined like stars, but everyone was afraid of it. The creature was a baby void reaver. Adult void reavers were the most dangerous hunters in space. They could break through spaceship walls with their claws. They could live in empty space where nothing else survived. This baby was only 3 months old, but it was still very dangerous. 27 different alien species had tried to help the baby. All of them failed. Some got hurt badly. Some even died. The Kaldrith were experts with animals. They used special smells and machines that could touch the brain. The baby broke everything and sent 4 workers to the hospital. The Sylvian species could feel emotions from far away. They tried to calm the baby's mind with their powers, but the baby's fear and anger was so strong it hurt 3 of them. They couldn't wake up for days. The Methodian robots felt no fear. They could not be hurt easily. They tried to train the baby with patterns and rules, but the baby was smart. It learned their patterns and attacked them when they came close. The baby destroyed 17 robots completely. Director Venn looked at the screens in his office. He was a Torquid, an alien with many arms like an octopus. His species was famous for training dangerous space animals, but even he didn't know what to do. Every screen showed the same thing. A small creature in the corner of the white room. It was shaking. Its sharp claws scratched marks on the metal floor. It was not trying to attack now. It was just scared. "We might have to kill it," Venn said sadly. His tentacles drooped down. "The baby cannot go free. It never learned to hunt. But it cannot stay in this room forever. It is suffering too much." His assistant was young. Her name was Kess. She looked through the list of species one more time. "There is one more species we have not tried yet." "Who?" Venn asked. "The humans. They have been asking to try for weeks." Venn's eye stalks pulled back in shock. "The Death Worlders, no. Absolutely not. They are almost as dangerous as the Reaver itself." "That is exactly why it might work, sir," Kess said. Venn was quiet for a long time. He watched the baby shake on the screen. Finally, he made a sound like a sigh. Bubbles came from his breathing mask. "Send the request, but only one human, and keep all safety systems ready." Corporal Hyun sat in the waiting room. His old boots tapped on the clean floor. He had worked for the Terran Deep Space Corps for 5 years. After leaving the military, he started working with alien animals. Other species thought it was strange that humans wanted to protect alien life. Most aliens saw humans as fighters and survivors who came from a brutal world. They were not completely wrong, but they did not understand everything about humans. When Director Venn came out, Hyun stood up and bowed his head a little. This was a human way to show respect. "Corporal Hyun," Venn said carefully, "you understand how dangerous this is?" "Yes, sir." "And you still want to try?" "I do." 27 species have tried. Many were injured. Some died. Why do you think a human can do what the galaxy's best experts could not do? Hyun thought about the question. He could have talked about humanity's long history with dangerous animals. Humans lived with wolves and bears and big cats for thousands of years. He could have mentioned his training or his experience with aggressive animals on 6 different planets. Instead, he said simply, "Because I read the reports. Everyone tried to tame it. Nobody tried to understand it." Venn looked at the human for a long time. There was something in the human's eyes. Not pride, but a quiet confidence that made Venn pause. "Very well. You have 1 week. But Corporal Hyun, if you fail, we will have no choice. We must end the creature's suffering." Hyun nodded slowly. "I understand. I will do my best." As the director led him to the holding area, Hyun's mind was already working. He thought about everything he knew about Void Reavers. They were apex predators, yes, very aggressive, certainly. But they were also very smart. They lived in family groups in the wild, and according to the few observations scientists had made, They were surprisingly sensitive to emotional distress. When they reached the observation deck above the White Room, Hyun finally saw the baby in person. It was beautiful. Yes, it was terrifying with those crystal claws and the way its muscles moved with barely controlled violence. But it was also beautiful in the way all wild things are beautiful. Perfect and completely real. The baby's eyes locked onto him immediately. It watched him through the clear barrier with sharp focus. "I will need some things," Hyun said quietly. "A thermal blanket, some dried meat if you have food it can eat, and about 6 hours to watch before I go inside." "You are not going in today?" Ven asked, surprised. "No, sir. First rule of working with scared animals, let them get used to you first." Hyun pulled up a chair and sat down where the baby could see him clearly. He did not stare at it. He did not make sudden moves. He simply opened a datapad and began to read. Sometimes he looked up to meet the baby's eyes, then looked away again. It was not weakness, it was communication. "I see you. I know you are there. I am not a threat." The baby watched him, confused. Every other creature had either tried to dominate it or came close smelling like fear. This strange, soft-looking creature just sat there reading. After 1 hour, the baby stopped walking back and forth. After 3 hours, it sat down. It was still watching, but no longer ready to attack. After 6 hours, when Hyun finally stood up to leave, the baby made a sound it had not made since its mother died, a soft, questioning chirp. Hyun smiled. "Yeah," he said quietly, even though the baby could not understand the words. "I see you too. I will be back tomorrow." As he walked away, he did not see the baby move to the edge of its room. It watched the human disappear down the hallway. For the first time in 3 months, the Void Reaver baby felt something other than fear and anger. It felt curious. The next morning, Hyun arrived early. The baby was already awake. Its glowing eyes were fixed on the doorway as if it had been waiting. "Good morning," Hyun said softly as he settled into his chair. He had brought breakfast, simple rice and vegetables from the station's human food area. The smell was different from the recycled air and clean metal of this place. The baby's nose moved. It came closer to the barrier, not to attack but to investigate the new smell. Director Ven appeared an hour later. His tentacles were curled with worry. "Corporal, I must warn you about staying too long without protection." "It is fine," Hyun said gently. "Look at how it is standing." Ven looked at the screens. The baby's crystal claws were pulled in. Its back was relaxed, not arched in the constant aggressive posture it had held for weeks. "This is remarkable. How did you do this?" "I did not do anything. I just stopped treating it like a problem that needed to be fixed." All through the day, Hyun kept his routine. He read and worked on reports. Sometimes he ate or drank water. Every action was calm and predictable, not threatening. When he looked at the baby, it was with interest, not fear or the desire to control. Sometimes he talked, not really to the baby, but he let it hear his voice, low and steady without sharp commands or the shaking sound of fear. The baby began to copy his patterns. When Hyun sat still, it sat still. When he moved slowly to stretch, it watched him without tension. By afternoon, Hyun stood and walked closer to the barrier. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that the baby could see him clearly. "You are scared," Hyun said quietly. "I understand that. Your mother is gone. This place is strange. Everyone who comes here wants something from you. They want you to be less than what you are." The baby tilted its head. The words meant nothing, but something in the tone was important. "I am not going to train you. I am not going to break you. I am just going to help you understand that not everything that comes close wants to hurt you." He paused. "Tomorrow, I am going to come inside. You can do whatever feels right to you, but I hope you will give me a chance." That night, Hyun did not sleep well. He had worked with dangerous animals before. A territorial Rex bear on another planet had almost torn off his arm, but this was different. Void Reavers were much more dangerous. One wrong move and he would not survive. But he had seen something in those dark eyes. Recognition. Intelligence. A desperate need for connection that the baby itself did not understand. Tomorrow would be the real test. Day 3 came. Hyun arrived carrying a thermal blanket. It was nothing special. Just synthetic fibers woven to keep heat in, standard equipment for any space traveler who might face cold places. But it was soft and it was warm and it carried his scent from the hours he had slept with it the night before. "This is it," Ven said. His voice showed his worry. "Corporal, I must stress that if the baby shows any aggression, the security team will pull you out immediately." "I know," Hyun said. His hands were steady as he prepared. No weapons, no armor except his normal clothes. Just the blanket draped over one arm and a small piece of dried meat in his pocket. The containment field opened with a soft hum. Hyun stepped inside. The baby immediately moved to the far corner. Its body tensed up. Every instinct told it to attack. This was its territory and intruders meant danger. But Hyun did not move forward. He sat down right inside the entrance. He made himself smaller, less threatening. He spread the blanket on the ground beside him and placed the piece of meat on top of it. Then he simply waited. The baby watched him for what felt like hours, but was only minutes. It could smell the meat. Its instincts confirmed the meat was safe to eat. But more than that, it could smell something missing from the human. No fear chemicals. No stress hormones flooding through his body. How was this creature so calm? Slowly, driven by hunger and curiosity together, the baby crept forward. Hyun did not move, did not reach out, did not even look directly at it. Instead, he kept his gaze soft and unfocused. The baby grabbed the meat quickly and went back to the corner. It ate fast, defensively, but its eyes never left Hyun. "Good," Hyun whispered. "That is good." He sat there for another hour. The baby finished the meat and began to pace again. But it was different now. Not the caged desperation from before, but real restlessness. It approached Hyun several times. Each time it got a little closer, testing how he would react. Hyun remained perfectly still. Finally, driven by an instinct it could not name, the baby came to the blanket. It sniffed at the fabric, confused by the strange feeling. Nothing in its short life had been soft. The ship where it was born had cold metal floors. This room was the same. But this was different. It touched the blanket carefully with one paw. Then, in a movement that made every observer hold their breath, it lay down on top of it. The warmth was immediate. The softness was strange but not unpleasant. And underneath it all was the scent of the strange creature who had shown no aggression, made no demands, and simply existed near it. The baby's eyes began to close. Hyun stayed motionless for another 30 minutes until he was certain the baby was asleep. Then, moving very slowly, he stood and backed toward the exit. The baby's eyes snapped open, watching him. Hyun froze. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Hyun did something no other species had tried. He lay back down on the floor outside the blanket, but close enough to still be near. "I am not leaving," he said softly, "just getting comfortable." The baby watched him for several minutes. Then, apparently satisfied, it put its head back down on the blanket and closed its eyes. Hyun smiled. It was the smallest victory, but it was a start. When the baby's breathing became deep and even in true sleep, Hyun finally left the room. Every scientist, security officer, and staff member on the observation deck was silent. They stared at the displays in disbelief. "Impossible," someone whispered. "Not impossible," Hyun said, rolling his shoulders. "Just patient." Director Ven came forward. His eye stalks were wide. "Corporal, in 30 years of conservation work, I have never seen anything like this. How did you know what to do?" Hyun looked back at the sleeping baby, still curled on the thermal blanket. "Humans domesticated wolves 20,000 years ago. We did not do it through force. We did it because one of our ancestors saw a hungry predator and thought, that creature and I are not so different. We offered food, warmth, friendship, and some of those wolves chose to stay. But Void Reavers are not wolves." "No," Hyun agreed, "but fear is fear. Loneliness is loneliness. And every predator in the universe understands the difference between a threat and a friend." He paused. "You just have to be willing to prove which one you are." Over the next 3 days, Hyun created a routine. Each morning, he entered the room with small offerings: dried meat, water that tasted different from the recycled station supply, sometimes just his presence. The baby, which he had started calling Buell in his private notes, the Korean word for star, began to wait for his visits. The change was remarkable. Where there had been a terrified, aggressive creature, there was now a cautious but curious young animal. Buell still had all the danger of its species. Those crystal claws could extend in a heartbeat. Its bite could crush metal, but the constant defensive aggression had faded. On day 5, Buell approached Hyun while he sat reading. The young reaver circled him 3 times. Scientists recognized this as territorial assessment behavior. Then it sat down just outside arm's reach, its tail tipped with a crystal blade sharp enough to cut through ship hulls, wrapped around its body in what the database said was a neutral posture. "Hey there," Hyun said softly, not looking up from his datapad. "Getting braver, are you not?" Buell made a sound, half chirp, half rumble. In adult reavers, this sound came before attacks. In babies, researchers believed it was a contact call, used to find family members. Hyun responded with a low hum, copying the tone if not the exact sound. Buell's ears pointed forward. This continued for an hour. Hyun reading, Buell sitting nearby, sometimes making sounds, each time getting a gentle response. To the observers, it looked like nothing. To Hyun, it was everything. The foundation of communication. The recognition that interaction could happen without violence. Director Ven visited every day now, fascinated despite his initial doubt. "The scientific community is requesting access to your methods," he told Hyun during a break. 3 journals want to document your approach." "They can watch the recordings," Hyun replied. "But they cannot interfere." "Not yet." "Of course," Ven hesitated. "Corporal, I must ask, what is your end goal here? The baby cannot stay in this room forever. It is growing rapidly. Within a year, it will be too large for this space, and void reavers cannot be released near inhabited systems." Hyun had been thinking about this. What about the sanctuary worlds? The conservation systems in the Outer Rim? Those are for endangered species that can take care of themselves. Buell never learned to hunt from its mother. It does not have the skills to survive in the wild. Then it needs a teacher. There are no other void reavers in captivity, and capturing an adult would be... Ven stopped, the absurdity clear. "Not an adult," Hyun said thoughtfully, "but maybe someone who understands apex predators, someone patient enough to let Buell learn at its own pace." "You?" Ven's tentacles curled in surprise. "You are suggesting permanent assignment?" "I am suggesting," Hyun said carefully, "that this baby needs more than rehabilitation. It needs family, and since it does not have one of its own species..." He shrugged. "Humans have a long history of adopting things that could kill us." On day 6, Hyun brought something new into the room. A simple rubber ball, designed for stress relief on long space trips. He sat in his usual spot and rolled it gently across the floor. Buell's eyes locked onto the movement immediately. Every predator instinct triggered. Moving object, potential prey, chase response activated. The young reaver pounced, claws extended, moving with the fluid grace that made adult reavers such terrifying hunters. The ball was destroyed in seconds, torn to pieces by crystal talons. Hyun did not flinch. "Got it out of your system?" Buell looked up, pieces of rubber hanging from its claws. For a moment, Hyun was sure the creature looked embarrassed. He pulled out another ball. He had brought 5, expecting this. This time, when he rolled it, he also stood and walked alongside it. Not chasing but moving with purpose, Buell watched, confused. The human was not running away, was not challenging, was just playing. The concept was alien. Since its mother's death, everything had been about survival, fear, defense. But this was something else. Buell hit the ball gently with a paw, claws pulled in. It rolled toward Hyun. He stopped it with his foot and rolled it back. Buell hit it again. They continued this for 20 minutes. A simple game of back and forth that looked ridiculous on the security feeds. A human playing ball with one of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, but it meant something profound. Trust. When Buell eventually got excited and destroyed this ball too, Hyun just laughed. "Yeah, impulse control is not your strong point yet. We will work on it." That night, for the first time, Buell fell asleep while Hyun was still in the room, not on the blanket alone, but pressed against the wall where Hyun sat, close enough that the human could feel the warmth coming from its body. Hyun did not move for 3 hours. His back hurt and his legs went numb. When he finally had to stand, he did so with such care that Buell barely moved. It made a soft sound before settling back into sleep. As Hyun walked out slowly, Director Ven was waiting. "The council has made a decision," Ven said. "Given your unprecedented success, they are authorizing a long-term program. You will be assigned as Buell's primary handler. The goal is eventual release to a sanctuary world. And in the meantime, we are building a larger habitat, more complex environment, hunting simulations, everything needed for it to develop proper survival skills." Ven paused. "You will essentially be raising it, Corporal. Teaching it to be a Void Reaver while keeping it safe until it is ready." Hyun looked back through the observation window at the sleeping young Reaver. Its starlight fur rose and fell with each breath. "How long?" 2 to 3 years minimum. "It is a significant commitment. I will do it." "You did not even hesitate." Hyun smiled. "Director, in the past week, that creature has learned to trust again. It has remembered how to play. It has stopped seeing every interaction as a fight for survival." He looked back at Ven. "How could I walk away from that?" 6 months passed. The new habitat was amazing. A dome that covered 3 square kilometers with different terrains, fake prey to hunt, and environmental challenges designed to develop a young Reaver's natural instincts. Buell had grown. What had been a baby the size of a large dog was now a juvenile the size of an earth tiger, all muscle and crystal features and devastating potential. Its starlight fur had darkened slightly, taking on the deep void black with silver highlights that marked a maturing Reaver. And through it all, Hyun had been there. The human had moved his living quarters to the facility next to the habitat. He spent 12 to 16 hours a day with Buell. They had fallen into rhythms that looked strange to observers but made perfect sense to them. Morning patrols of the territory, afternoon hunting practice, evening rest periods where Buell would sprawl across the heated rocks while Hyun read or worked on reports. Teaching a Void Reaver to hunt without being its natural prey species required creativity. Hyun used drones programmed with escape patterns, simulating the flight patterns of the space-dwelling creatures that Reavers normally hunted. At first, Buell had been clumsy. All enthusiasm and no technique. But the instincts were there waiting to be refined. No, Hyun called out one afternoon, watching Buell miss another drone. "You are showing your attack too early, watch." He crouched low, demonstrating the subtle weight shift that came before a leap. Of course, Hyun could not actually pounce with a Reaver's power, but the principle was the same. Economy of movement, conservation of energy, explosive acceleration at the critical moment. Buell watched carefully, head tilted. Then it tried again, this time keeping the preliminary movement small. The drone did not react in time. Buell's claws closed around it with a satisfying crunch. "There you go." Hyun grinned. "Perfect." Buell brought the destroyed drone to Hyun, dropping it at his feet. This behavior had developed over months, a gift-giving instinct that scientists found fascinating. In the wild, Reaver packs shared kills. Buell had adopted Hyun as pack, and this was the result. "Thank you," Hyun said seriously, picking up the broken technology. "You are getting scary good at this." Dr. Su, the scientist assigned to document Buell's development, watched from the observation station. She was one of the few humans on staff, a specialist in predator thinking who had joined the project 3 months in. "The bond is remarkable," she commented to Director Ven. "Buell's development is actually faster compared to what little data we have on wild juveniles. The security of having a stable pack structure seems to be allowing it to focus on learning skills rather than survival anxiety." "And Corporal Hyun?" Ven asked. "How is he doing?" Sue pulled up biomonitor data. "Physically, he is in the best shape of his life. Spending all day with an apex predator tends to keep you alert. Psychologically?" She smiled. "He is happy. Maybe the happiest I have seen any handler in this situation." It was true. Hyun had found something he had not even known he was looking for. Purpose that went beyond himself. A connection that crossed species barriers. Every breakthrough with Buell felt like a shared victory. Every moment of trust earned felt like a gift, but it was not always easy. The incident happened in month 7. Buell was practicing with simulated prey, sophisticated drones that not only moved but fought back with non-lethal deterrence. It was necessary training. Real prey would not submit easily, and Buell needed to learn persistence and tactical thinking. One drone got lucky, hitting Buell with a kinetic pulse that sent the young reaver tumbling. It was not harmful, just disorienting, but Buell's frustration had been building all session. Multiple misses. The prey escaping. The sting of repeated failure. Buell roared. A sound that made the habitat's reinforced walls vibrate, and in a flash of instinctive rage spun toward the nearest living thing. Hyun. Time seemed to slow. Hyun saw the killing intent in those black hole eyes, saw the crystal claws extend to full length, saw the muscles bunch for a strike that would disembowel him before he could blink. He did not run, did not raise his hands to defend. Instead, he dropped to one knee and lowered his head, exposing his neck. The ultimate gesture of trust in pack dynamics. The physical statement of "I am not your enemy." Bile, he said quietly. Just the name. No command, no fear, just recognition. The reaver was airborne, claws extended, momentum carrying it forward. It could not stop the physical motion, but in that split second, something in its brain fired. Recognition bond pack Buell twisted midair. An impossible contortion, redirecting its strike. Claws that had been aimed at Hyun's body instead dug into the ground beside him, scoring deep gouges in the reinforced flooring. The reaver's bulk crashed past Hyun, close enough that he felt the displacement of air but making no contact. In the observation station, alarms were screaming. Security forces were mobilizing. Dr. Sue had half risen from her seat, horror on her face, but in the habitat, Hyun simply stayed kneeling, head down, breathing steadily. Buell circled back, agitated, confused by its own actions. It approached Hyun slowly, making a sound the human had never heard before, a high-pitched, distressed keening. "It is okay," Hyun said softly. "I know you did not mean it. I know." Buell pressed its head against Hyun's shoulder, the equivalent of an apology in its species-limited social vocabulary. Hyun slowly raised one hand and rested it on Buell's neck, fingers tangling in the starlight fur. They stayed like that for several minutes, both calming down, both processing what had almost happened. Later, after security stood down and Hyun had been checked for injuries, he had none, not even a scratch. Director Ven called him to his office. "That was unacceptably dangerous," Ven said, but his tone was more concerned than angry. "Corporal, you could have died. But I did not. Only because Buell, against every instinct, chose not to kill you." Ven's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Do you understand how remarkable that is? How unprecedented? An apex predator in full attack mode, redirecting at the last possible moment? I understand it means the bond is real," Hyun said quietly. "I understand it means Buell sees me as pack, not prey. And I understand that this is part of the process. Buell is a predator. Sometimes predators lose control. What matters is what happened next. It recognized me, stopped itself, and showed remorse. You are asking us to bet your life on that bond. I am not asking anything. I am telling you I trust Buell." Dr. Sue, who had been present for the meeting, spoke up. "Director, with respect, this actually represents a breakthrough. Buell demonstrated advanced thinking override of instinct. That is a level of impulse control we have never documented in reavers this young. If anything, it proves the socialization is working." Ben was silent for a long moment. Finally, he sighed, bubbles rising from his breathing apparatus. "Continue the program. But Corporal Hyun, please be more careful. The galaxy has few enough fools willing to befriend monsters. We cannot afford to lose you." The months continued. Hyun and Buell's bond deepened. The young reaver learned to control its impulses better, to distinguish between play and real threats, to understand that Hyun's presence meant safety, not competition. They developed a language of sorts, not words but gestures and sounds that both understood. A low hum from Hyun meant calm, rest, safety. A specific chirp from Buell meant hunger or the desire to hunt. A touch to the shoulder meant affection. A step back meant space was needed. Other staff members began to notice something interesting. When Hyun was stressed or tired, Buell would become more protective, positioning itself between Hyun and anyone who approached, not aggressively but clearly. When Buell was frustrated or overstimulated, Hyun's presence alone could calm it. No commands needed, just proximity. "It is almost like they can read each other," one technician observed. "That is exactly what is happening," Dr. Sue explained. "Hyun has learned to read Buell's body language fluently, and Buell has learned to interpret human emotional states through scent and behavior. They have created a shared communication system." By the end of the first year, Buell had mastered basic hunting techniques. It could track moving prey, execute coordinated strikes, and even showed the beginnings of strategic thinking, hiding and ambushing rather than just chasing. But more importantly, Bayul had learned something no captive Void Reaver had ever learned before: trust. One evening, as Hyun sat watching the artificial sunset in the habitat, a carefully programmed light show that mimicked the nebula where Reavers lived, Bayul approached and lay down beside him. Not for food, not for play, just to be near. Hyun rested his hand on Buell's side, feeling the steady breathing, the warmth of its body. "You have come a long way," Hyun said softly. "From that scared baby who destroyed everything to this. You are going to be magnificent, Buell. A true Void Reaver." Buell made a soft sound. Content. Safe. In the observation station, Director Ven watched the scene with something close to wonder. "Impossible," he whispered. But this time it was not said with disbelief. It was said with awe. A human and an apex predator, sitting together in peace, not because one had dominated the other, but because both had chosen connection over fear. It was, Ven realized, the most profound thing he had witnessed in his entire career. And it had been accomplished not with technology or superior knowledge, but with the simplest thing imaginable: patience, understanding, and a warm blanket offered without expectation of return. The galaxy had much to learn from these strange Deathworlders. Much indeed. 2 years after Hyun first walked into a room with nothing but a thermal blanket and patience, Buell was ready. Or at least that is what the scientists said. The young Reaver had grown into a magnificent creature, nearly adult-sized now, with fully developed hunting instincts, territorial awareness, and survival skills. The crystal features that made its species so dangerous had hardened into natural weapons capable of cutting through most known materials. Its starlight fur had taken on the deep void black of maturity, and when it moved, it was with the fluid, terrifying grace of an apex predator in its prime. The habitat had become too small. Buell needed more space, more challenges, more of everything that a wild Reaver would have. It was time to talk about release. Hyun knew this day would come. He had always known. But knowing and accepting were two different things. He stood in the habitat one morning watching Buell practice aerial intercepts, leaping from elevated platforms to catch drones simulating zero-gravity prey. Every movement was perfect. Instinct and training combining into deadly efficiency. Dr. Sue joined him, her expression thoughtful. "The transport is being prepared. We have identified a suitable sector in the Stellaris Nebula. Active Reaver population, good prey density, but far enough from shipping lanes to minimize danger to travelers." "I know," Hyun said quietly. "You have done an incredible thing. Hyun, you have saved a life, taught it to survive, and given an endangered species one more chance at continuation." She paused. "The scientific papers alone will change how we think about rehabilitation. But more than that, you have proven something important about the nature of connection across species. I want to go with it," Hyun said suddenly. Sue blinked. "What?" "I'm requesting assignment to the sanctuary sector. Someone needs to monitor Bayul's integration, ensure it successfully joins a pack. That is standard protocol for releases. For 6 months, maybe a year." "Hyun, you are talking about something more. The sanctuary sectors are off limits to everyone except essential conservation staff. You would be alone in deep space for years possibly." Hyun finally looked at her. "I would not be alone." Sue's expression softened with understanding. "You are willing to give up everything? Your career, your life as you know it? My career is in conservation. And my life?" Hyun looked back at Buell, who had noticed their presence and was approaching with curiosity. "My life is right there." The objections came from every direction. The Terran Space Corps tried to deny his transfer. The Institute questioned the ethics of such extended isolation. Even Director Ven, who had come to respect Hyun's dedication, argued against it. But Hyun was firm. "You are going to put a juvenile Reaver, who has never met another of its kind, into a nebula full of territorial adults and hope it figures things out? It needs an advocate, a familiar presence during the transition. That is me." In the end, they could not deny the logic. Release programs succeeded or failed based on the transition period. Buell might be trained, but it was also bonded to a human. The shock of sudden abandonment could undo years of progress. The compromise was a 2-year initial assignment. with options to extend or rotate out depending on Beale's integration success. Hyun agreed, knowing he would never leave. The preparations took 3 months. A specialized monitoring station was constructed at the edge of the Stellaris Nebula, small, self-sufficient with enough supplies for years if needed. Long-range sensors to track Reaver biosignatures, communication equipment to send reports back to the Institute. During this time, Hyun intensified Bial's training. The Reaver needed to be ready for everything. How to hunt in 3-dimensional space, how to read the territorial markers of other Reavers, how to fight if challenged, how to submit if outmatched. It was strange, teaching a creature to survive without him. Every lesson felt like preparing for goodbye. One afternoon, they were practicing evasion techniques. Hyun had programmed drones to act as aggressive Reavers, forcing Buell to learn retreat and defense, not just attack. Sometimes the smart thing is to run, Hyun explained, knowing Buell could not understand the words but hoping the tone conveyed meaning. Not everything is a fight you can win. And there is no shame in survival. Buell watched him with those deep black eyes. Then, in a gesture that still amazed Hyun even after 2 years, the Reaver gently bumped its head against his chest. Affection, acknowledgement, trust. "I'm going to miss you," Hyun said softly, wrapping his arms around Buell's neck. The Reaver was massive now, easily capable of killing him with a casual swipe. But in this moment, it was just the two of them. Pack. The journey to the Stellaris Nebula took 3 weeks. The transport ship was equipped with a specialized hold for Buell, large enough to move around but protected from the void. Hyun spent every day there, maintaining the routine they had established over 2 years. But Buell knew something was changing. The Reaver was agitated, restless in a way it had not been since it was a baby. It could sense the shift in environment, feel the approach of something significant. "It is okay," Hyun said one evening, sitting beside the viewing port where Buell pressed against the transparent surface, staring at the growing nebula outside. "You are going home. Your real home." Buell made a questioning sound, low and uncertain. "I will be nearby," Hyun promised. "Not in the nebula. You need to be with your own kind, but close enough. Watching over you." He rested his hand against the viewport on the opposite side from where Buell's massive paw was pressed. Always. The crew was nervous about the release. Void Reavers were territorial and aggressive. Introducing a juvenile, even one as well-trained as Buell, carried risks. If the local pack rejected it violently, if Buell could not adapt, if something went wrong, "It will be fine," Hyun told them with more confidence than he felt. The transport positioned itself at the edge of a sector where sensors had detected a small Reaver pack. Not too large, which might be overwhelming. Not too aggressive based on their movement patterns. The night before release, Hyun could not sleep. He sat in the hold with Buell, both of them quiet. "I taught you everything I could," Hyun said into the darkness. "How to hunt, how to fight, how to survive. But the most important thing I hope you learned is this." He moved closer, resting his forehead against Buell's. "Not everything that approaches is a threat. Some things, some connections are worth the risk of trust." Buell rumbled softly, a sound of contentment. "You are going to do great things," Hyun continued. "You are going to live the life you were meant to live. And maybe, just maybe, you will remember the human who believed in you when no one else did." Morning came. The bay doors opened to reveal the vast emptiness of space, shot through with streams of colored gas and distant stars. And somewhere in that cosmic wilderness, Buell's species thrived. Hyun stood at the edge of the bay, pressure-suited, tethered but as close to the void as safety allowed. Buell stood beside him, free from any restraint, staring out at freedom. "This is it," Hyun said quietly. "Everything I taught you, everything you learned, it was for this moment." Buell turned to look at him. In those black hole eyes, Hyun saw intelligence, emotion, and something that might have been gratitude. "Go on," Hyun urged, his voice breaking slightly. "Find your pack, hunt, live, be what you were meant to be." For a long moment, Buell did not move. Then it did something that made every observer's breath catch. It pressed its head against Hyun's helmet, the closest it could come to their old gesture of affection through the barrier of his suit. Then Buell leaped. The Reaver's body was made for the void. Within seconds, it was nothing but a shimmering form among the nebula's gases, moving with joy and freedom toward something it had never known but instinctively understood. Home. Hyun watched until he could not see Buell anymore. Then he watched for another hour, until the crew gently insisted he come inside. His eyes were wet behind his helmet's visor, but he was smiling. "Good luck, Buell," he whispered. "Good luck." The monitoring station was small. Just Hyun, a medical AI, and enough supplies for 2 years. It was positioned at the nebula's edge, close enough to track Buell's biosignature, far enough to not interfere with natural behaviors. The first week was hard. Sensors showed Buell exploring alone, hunting small prey, learning the three-dimensional environment. Several times it approached other reavers only to be driven off. Juveniles were not welcome in established packs until they proved themselves. Hyun watched the data feeds constantly, unable to intervene, unable to help, just trusting that Buell had learned enough. On day 9, something changed. Buell's biosignature merged with another, a female reaver, older, likely experienced. The encounter lasted hours. The sensors could not tell if it was combat or something else. But Buell's signature remained stable, not distressed, not injured. Day 12, 2 more signatures joined them, then 3 more. By day 15, Buell was moving with a pack of 7 reavers, participating in coordinated hunts, establishing territory. It had found family. Hyun allowed himself to breathe for the first time in weeks. His baby, the scared creature that had destroyed 27 species' attempts at help, that had nearly died from loneliness and fear, was home. And it was thriving. 2 years in the monitoring station became 3. 3 became 5. Hyun submitted reports to the Institute regularly, documenting Buell's successful integration. But his requests to rotate out went unanswered. The truth was simple. He never actually requested to leave. He just sent the standard forms, knowing he would ignore any approval that came back. His life had become the monitoring station, the endless void, and the distant presence of the reaver he had raised. It was a strange existence, solitary in a way that would drive most people mad. But Hyun found peace in it. The station's AI, which he had named Bomb, the Korean word for spring, provided basic companionship. They played chess, discussed philosophy. Bomb would read to him from the station's extensive library during meals. But mostly Hyun watched the sensors, tracking not just Buell but the entire pack it had joined, watching them hunt, observing their territorial disputes with neighboring groups, documenting behaviors that science had never been able to study before. Buell had become a success story, a model for future rehabilitation efforts. Several other species had contacted the Institute, requesting consultations on working with dangerous predators. Hyun's methods were being taught in xenobiology programs across dozens of worlds. 3 universities wanted to name awards after him. 2 governments offered him prestigious positions. The Galactic Conservation Institute tried to promote him to director level. He declined everything. His place was here at the edge of the nebula, watching over the creature that had become more than a project, more than a success story. Family supply ships came every 6 months, brief contact with the outside universe. The crews always seemed shocked to find Hyun healthy and content. They expected to find someone broken by isolation. Instead, they found a man at peace. "Do you not get lonely?" one captain asked during a supply transfer. Hyun smiled. "I am never alone. Buell is out there. That is enough." The captain, a grizzled Felnorian who had seen her share of strange humans, just shook her head. "You Deathworlders are something else." Years passed. Hyun grew older. His hair started showing gray at the temples. Lines formed around his eyes from years of smiling at censored data. His body remained strong from the station's exercise equipment and the discipline of military training that never quite left him. And through it all, Buell thrived. The sensors showed the Reaver had become a pack leader. Not the alpha. That position belonged to the older female who had first accepted Buell, but a respected member. Important enough that its judgment mattered in pack decisions. More remarkably, Buell had offspring. 3 cubs, born in the 3rd year. The sensors could not show much detail at that range, but Hyun's heart had swelled with pride when the data confirmed it. His baby had babies. He wondered sometimes if Buell remembered him. If, in the vast complexity of a Reaver's brain, there was space for memories of a human who had offered warmth when the universe felt cold. He liked to think so. On the 5th anniversary of the release, something unprecedented happened. The monitoring station's proximity alarms activated, a large biosignature approaching. moving with purpose, not the random drift of a hunting reaver but deliberate navigation. Hyun pulled up the visual feeds, his heart racing. It was Beul. The reaver was fully grown now, massive and magnificent, a perfect example of the species, starlight fur gleaming against the void, crystal claws that could tear through starship hulls, muscles that moved with deadly grace. And following behind, staying close, were three smaller signatures, Beul's cubs. They approached the station slowly. The cubs were nervous, their movements jerky and uncertain, but Beul moved with confidence, leading them directly toward the observation port where Hyun stood frozen. The adult reaver stopped just meters from the transparent surface, close enough that Hyun could see every detail. The scars from territorial fights, the slight graying around the muzzle that came with age, the intelligence in those black hole eyes. Hyul looked directly at the observation port, directly at where Hyun stood, hand pressed against the glass. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. 5 years of separation, a lifetime in some ways. But in that gaze, Hyun saw recognition, memory, acknowledgement. You did this, those eyes seemed to say. You saved me. You taught me. You let me go. One of the cubs, braver than the others, drifted closer to investigate the strange structure. Beul made a low sound, not quite a warning, more like instruction. The cub backed off but continued watching with curiosity. Hyun felt tears streaming down his face. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming joy. Beul had not just survived, it had thrived, had become a parent, had brought its young to show the strange human who had been its first family. They are beautiful, Hyun whispered, knowing Beul could not hear through the void. You did so well. I'm so proud of you, Beul chirped. That same sound it had made as a baby, the contact call. Then the great reaver did something that made Hyun laugh through his tears. It spun in a slow circle, showing off, the way it used to do in the habitat after successfully catching a drone. Look at me. Look at what I have become. I see you, Hyun said, pressing both hands against the glass now. I have always seen you. The cubs, emboldened by their parents' confidence, began to play. Tumbling through the void, chasing each other, their movements clumsy compared to Beul's grace but full of joy. Life expressing itself in the oldest way. Through play, Beul watched them for a moment, then looked back at Hyun. And in a gesture that transcended species, that spoke to something universal about parenthood and pride and love, Beul seemed to nod. This is my life now. This is what you gave me. They stayed for nearly an hour. The cubs eventually tired, clustering close to Beul for warmth and security. The adult reaver remained at the observation port, sometimes watching Hyun, sometimes watching the stars, content to simply be present. Finally, Beul chirped once more. A farewell. Then, with the cubs following, turned and began moving back into the depths of the nebula. Hyun watched them go until they were nothing but distant points of light. Then he watched the empty space they had occupied for hours more. Bomb, he said finally, his voice hoarse. Yes, Hyun, the AI responded gently. Add a note to today's log. Subject Beul returned to monitoring station with 3 offspring. All appear healthy and thriving. Integration into pack structure remains successful. Prognosis excellent. Noted. Will you be adding anything else? Hyun smiled, wiping his eyes. Yes, personal observation. The subject appears happy. Mission accomplished. The news of Beul's return spread through the scientific community like wildfire. The fact that a fully wild reaver had deliberately approached the monitoring station, bringing its offspring to show a human, was unprecedented. It suggested a level of emotional complexity and memory retention that no one had thought possible. The Institute sent messages, congratulations, requests for detailed analysis. Questions about whether this changed the rehabilitation protocols. Hyun answered them all professionally, but his heart was not in the analysis. His heart was full of something simpler, a parent's pride in a child's success. Months passed. Life returned to its quiet routine. Monitoring sensors, maintaining the station, exercising, reading, existing in the peaceful solitude of deep space. Then, on a day like any other, Hyun was reviewing sensor data when he noticed something odd. Beul's pack was moving, not hunting, not patrolling, moving with purpose toward a specific location. He expanded the sensor range and his breath caught another pack, larger, more aggressive. They were encroaching on Buell's pack territory. This was natural. Territory disputes were common among Reavers. Usually they were resolved through displays of dominance with minimal actual violence. Usually. But as Hyun watched the data feeds, his military training kicked in. The approaching pack was not posturing. They were advancing in a coordinated assault formation. This was not a dispute. This was an attack. Buell's pack gathered at the territory boundary. 7 adults including Buell versus 12 attackers, poor odds. And somewhere behind the defensive line, Hyul knew were the cubs. Including Buell's 3. Hyun's hands moved across the console without conscious thought. He pulled up communication protocols, activated emergency beacon systems. His fingers hovered over the defense grid controls. The station had defensive weapons, designed to deter aggressive wildlife, powerful enough to drive off Reavers if necessary. He could intervene, could shift the balance, but should he? This was nature, red in tooth and claw. Void Reavers fought. Sometimes they died. It was the way of things. If he interfered, he would be violating every principle of conservation, placing his emotional attachment above the natural order. On the sensors, the two packs collided. The data was chaos, multiple biosignatures overlapping, elevated stress hormones, readings consistent with combat. Hyun watched, helpless, his heart pounding. Every instinct screamed to help, to protect Buell the way he had for 2 years. But Buell was not his to protect anymore. Buell was wild, free, living the life it was meant to live. And that life included danger. The fight lasted 17 minutes, the longest 17 minutes of Hyun's life. When the biosignatures finally separated, Hyun immediately counted. Buell's pack, 7 signatures, all present, some injured based on the stress readings, but alive. The attacking pack was retreating, leaving 2 of their members behind. Dead or too injured to follow. Buell's pack had won. Hyun sagged in his chair, hands shaking. They are okay. They are all okay. Hyun, Bom said carefully, your heart rate is dangerously elevated. Should I prepare medical intervention? No, Hyun laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. No, I am fine. I am better than fine. They won, Bom. Buell's pack defended their territory. I see. This is significant. It means Buell is not just surviving. It is succeeding. It is protecting its family. It is doing exactly what a Void Reaver should do. He pulled up detailed scans of Buell specifically. Elevated stress hormones, yes. Minor tissue damage consistent with combat. But nothing critical. Nothing permanent. Buell was a warrior now. A protector. Everything Hyun had hoped it would become. Over the following weeks, Hyun watched Buell's pack carefully. The victory had consequences. Their territory expanded, incorporating the defeated pack's hunting grounds. Other nearby packs gave them wider berth, recognizing the strength of this group. And Buell, the orphaned cub that 27 species could not help, that was too dangerous, too damaged, too difficult to save, had become one of the pack's most valuable members. Strong, smart, protective. A survivor, exactly as it was meant to be. Years continued to pass. Hyun's hair went fully gray. His body, despite his best efforts, began showing the signs of age. But his spirit remained strong, bolstered by the knowledge that his work had mattered. Supply ships brought news from the wider galaxy. 3 more Void Reaver cubs had been successfully rehabilitated using Hyun's methods. Dozens of other apex predator species were being helped by techniques he pioneered. The conservation community considered him a legend. But sitting in his small station at the edge of the Stellaris Nebula, Hyun did not feel like a legend. He felt like something simpler, a man who had seen a scared child and offered comfort, a pack member watching over family from a distance, a teacher proud of his students' success. On quiet nights when the nebula's colors danced outside his window and the sensors showed Buell's biosignature moving confidently through its territory, Hyun would make tea and sit by the observation port. You did good, he would whisper to the void. We did good. And somewhere in the cosmic darkness, a Void Reaver would pause in its eternal hunt. Perhaps remembering, in whatever way apex predators remember, the warmth of a thermal blanket, the patience of a strange, soft creature who never raised a hand in violence, the feeling of being seen not as a monster but as a life worth saving. The universe was vast and cold and often cruel, but sometimes in the space between stars, connections formed that defied all logic, bridges built not on similarity, but on the universal need for understanding, for compassion, for someone to say, "I see your pain and I will not turn away." Every species in the galaxy had tried to tame the apex predator's cub, through force and fear and dominance. A human had succeeded with nothing but patience and a warm blanket, and in doing so, had proven the most important truth of all, that kindness, real kindness, transcends every barrier the universe can create, even the barrier between predator and prey, even the barrier between fear and trust, even the barrier between human and monster. Because in the end, Hyun had learned what Buell had always known. There were no monsters. Only creatures trying to survive in a difficult universe. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone willing to help you do it. Pack, after all, was not about species. It was about choosing to stay when everything else told you to run. And both Hyun and Buell had made that choice. Every single day,